This episode of Lawyers Tell All is brought to you by the Intake Academy. Are you ready to convert more callers to qualified cases, rapidly qualify good cases, and transform unqualified prospects to advocates for your firm, whether you're able to handle their case or not? Visit www.intakeacademy.com and discover how to cement relationships with more of your ideal clients. Get them to commit to you and send you more referrals than you ever thought possible. Welcome to the Lawyers Tell All podcast, where Chris Mullins, the preeminent sales and communications consultant in the legal industry, shows you how it looks through lawyers' eyes. Here, innovators in the trenches provide powerful insights that help you connect with new clients, handle the sometimes harsh realities of the legal profession, and embrace the mindsets needed to succeed. Be sure to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, lean in, tune in, and let's take a deep dive.
Welcome, everyone. It's Chris Mullins with Lawyers Tell All and the Intake Academy. Thank you for being here so much today. Today, a good friend of mine, attorney Erica Chavez, is here. Erica, tell everyone about yourself.
Well, I'm a lawyer. I'm in Los Angeles, California. I do primarily brain injury cases. I've spent the last 2 decades of my life working on catastrophic injury cases. Over the years, we've sort of said a subspecialty in there, brain injury cases. I also run TBI Med Legal, which is now the biggest or largest brain injury conference in the world. And we're definitely the largest med legal conference in the U.S.
Amazing. So how do law firms identify TBI cases?
Oh, not well, I guess is the answer.
Not well, but so
they're hard. They're hard. It's not that anyone's doing a bad job. It's that they're really, really hard. How do you know, if someone's got a hole through their head or their brains landed on their lap, you know there's a brain injury. So those are easy. It's the more mild cases that are harder for everybody. So those cases are the ones that are the harder to identify cases. They usually will present as a headache or they'll, present as something else. And many of times they're missed, right? Because the person either forgets to tell you about it or we're screening for it just flat wrong. I think that a lot of times people will ask our team tends to ask if there was a loss of consciousness. And that's not the best and the only way to identify it. It's a good question. It's an important question. But if you do ask the loss of consciousness question, you should ask for how long. If it was, under 1 minute, if it was 1 to 5 minutes, 6 to 30 minutes, you should get a time frame. But the real question is, was there a change in consciousness, right? Were they dazed? Were they confused? Were they disoriented? And you want to look for that loss in time. So when you ask, how are we doing it? We're mostly not doing it right. I'm happy to share one of the many checklists I have. But I think that at intake, you're going to want to screen for things like, did they hit their head, or was there an event? And also realize they didn't have to hit their head to have a TBI. A lot of times people think they have to have hit their head. They don't have to. And so you're looking for things on the onset.
Well, wait a minute. Let me ask you a question. So if they didn't hit their head, this is what people are going to be thinking. Then they're going to be thinking, well, how did they get a traumatic brain injury? That's exactly what people are going to think.
So let's say that somebody tripped and fell and they landed on their shoulder and their head never hits the concrete. The brain, nonetheless, let's imagine I fall on my side, still did that coup contra coup thing that our brain does, right? Or let's pretend I'm in a car crash and I get hit, but my head never bounces on the back. You know, those old seats like from the 1950s where there's no headrest, right?
Right.
Am I aging myself a little bit there?
No, you're aging me, but we don't need to go there.
We won't talk about it. But those times though, right? The head is still
it goes back. Yeah, it goes back. Yeah.
I didn't have to hit my head anywhere, but still my brain went forward and back and probably forward again in my head. And so I still was able to sustain injury to the brain without having actually hit my head on something.
So like with my dog, it wasn't that long ago, and she's new to me, and so I don't really know her very well, but she pulled me and I went down a hill. It wasn't a big hill, but it was just a surprise, and I went down and I smashed my head on the pavement and I heard it.
That's bad. That sound of flesh on anything you don't.
But is that like that could happen too, like just something like that? I mean, and I was okay, period. I was just okay, but somebody could do that and maybe they seem okay, but then they're not okay, right?
Correct. And that was my next point is, many times that we were screening cases just at intake and then we never look back again. And what I would really urge people to do is look back at 30 days, at 60 days, at 90 days, and even at that like 6-month mark, because a lot of times your clients aren't going to be, sometimes they just don't want to be forthcoming because they don't want something to be wrong with them. It really
exactly don't. Right.
And the other part of it is it's not just asking the client what they're experiencing, but getting that person that lives with them.
Yeah, the caretaker or family member or
husband, wife, whatever, and ask them like, are they getting forgetful? Are they a little bit more testy? Are they do they have like loss of inhibition? There's all sorts of symptoms that maybe we're just not thinking so much about, that the other person in the house might realize they're a little slower to respond.
So maybe what intake could do, not to interrupt you, but maybe what intake could do is ask, is your partner there, or your mom or whatever, are they there? And then they put them on speakerphone and have that conversation to find out right there on the spot.
Absolutely. I think you could do that. I usually tell them, can I have a private conversation with them? Because I want to make sure that,
confidential.
All
that stuff. Like
but you want to ask them, and I sometimes ask them, balance is a big thing too, right? I don't ask them balance usually in the context of all the TBI sorts of questions. Sometimes I'll let that one kind of like float over somewhere else so that they don't think that something's wrong with their head. But I will ask them, how many times have you almost fallen in the shower when you're washing your hair? Because that lets you know when their eyes are closed and their hands are up, you definitely know if there's a balance issue going on, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll ask them how often that's happening to them. So it's more almost commonplace as opposed to, does this happen to you? How often has this been happening since you've been in the crash?
So like, what about memory too?
Ask them about memory a lot, but what I'll ask them is, instead of asking, you could always ask them, are you forgetting things? Or do you notice that you're forgetting things? But you can ask them, do you notice you forget things more often when you go to the grocery store? Are you forgetting things when you go to the grocery store? That's like an easy one, because that's usually when their mind's a little more free or it's more hurried, right? Like there's something going on, they got to hurry up and get something done. And that's when you're going to hear stories about, they left their they paid for the groceries and they left them there, or they forgot their keys. Every time they go, they leave their keys on the, little stand where you pay, or you'll hear stuff like that. So those are always really good questions to ask. But yeah, definitely about memory. there's different kinds of memory problems. There's like difficulty concentrating and like fogginess.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also problems with like reading or problems with being word blind, or that's why. And that's the other thing about you. We talked about asking these questions about at intake, but you're not going to notice those problems day one after the crash. Usually it's going to take, weeks and months for you to realize, I can't remember where I parked my car anymore. And I used to remember where I parked my car.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take you weeks and months to realize that you say the same thing over and over again. It's going to take that much time to realize that you have sleeping problems and there's a sleep disorder happening now.
So we should have a program in place, an intake, where we're checking in with them, like you said, 30, 60, 90. We have an outbound program where we're checking in with them, seeing if they're okay. Then we do a little screening of some intake questions and just keep checking and monitoring them. And yeah, so we should do
that.
And
imagine what that would do for your clients. They would feel like their lawyer cares.
Oh my God. They would be like, wow.
My lawyer called me. Like,
Yeah, they told me that they're going to call me 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and they're actually doing it. And they're asking me how I am.
And it's such an easy thing. I've been talking to everyone about outsourcing lately. That's kind of been my new hot topic, is bringing in international staff. But that's
something I do a lot with my clients, and it works.
It does.
Yeah,
I agree. And I think that those that are not doing it, it's a whole nother topic for me. I can't wait to talk about it another time. But I will tell you, if you're not doing it, you're really missing out. And I think this is the new version of the Yellow Pages, the way that the Yellow Pages changed PI many years ago, or we changed in PI, where those who wouldn't let go of it kind of got left behind, and those who went on with the digital and everything else went into the next generation.
Yeah.
I think that using international staff is the same thing. If you're paying someone $50 an hour to do something and someone else is paying them $3 an hour to do it, that is all that money that's going back into their marketing.
Yep, marketing.
Their marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So safe point about that. But this is one of those things where call Chris, find out, how do I get someone to call my clients at 30, 60, 90 days?
Yep.
Check in on them. Get that checklist. Get it to them. And if you did nothing more than that, if you catch one case a year, one, it pays for itself. Number two, you helped one more client get so much more value out of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the thing is, you have to teach your intake team how to ask the questions. How the words matter. So how to ask the questions, how to listen, how to provide empathy, when to provide empathy, when not to, because that's dangerous.
No, it's true. But those are the things you got to teach. Those are such high level. I mean, you have mastered intake at like a PhD level of like intake. And if we can learn a piece of that and take that with us and use that, or use what you can teach us, we can help so many more people. And if you can somehow systemize these brain injury cases, at least to identify them,
right.
My office has done a good job at, identifying the big cases at the intake, but getting those mild cases, that's where you move the dial for your office also, though, right? Because these are obviously lucrative cases, right? People come to you to help get you. They come to you as a lawyer for you to get them money.
Right.
Bottom line. We're not able to give them candy. We can't sell them pizza. We cannot check their eye vision for them. We can't do any of those things for them. We can get them money.
Right.
And if you can identify a brain injury case, in addition to whatever spine issues or ortho issues are happening, you've now taken that value and you've made, one claim into 5, times over.
Mm-hmm. So do you have other questions that you can share that should be asked?
Yeah, I will give you, so I've separated this into a couple of different things, but I will share them with you and then you can give them to your
that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Maybe they can reach out, but there's definitely, I ask different questions at the onset than what I would ask at 3 months and 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely have a different set of questions that I use for the family members, because the family members can give you a lot of information. Like, you want to get to know someone, I've learned, meet the family. You really get to know them at that point. But they will give you so much more information about, you know, what they're struggling with. They can, what's cool about the checklist that I have is I've separated it by different parts of the brain. And so I ask all of the frontal lobe questions together. So we'll talk about problem solving, judgment, and mental flexibility, and attention and concentration, and all those, you know, things that are in the frontal lobe. Then the second set of questions will go to like the parietal lobe, and they'll ask questions about math and reading and just, you know, academic school. And then go on to the occipital lobe and cerebellum and brainstem and temporal lobe. And so I did that because, you know, I want you to understand what happens at what function, but also understanding this is where you come in, Chris, and really, you helped me be able to identify these cases better many years ago, because I remember I told you that one of the things that I was trying to ask them is if they were having trouble with their memory. Are they having trouble, like, are they forgetting things, and then long-term versus short-term? And you said, well, you don't ask someone if they're having memory problems. You ask them about things that they're forgetting. Tell me about this. Tell me, ask that open-ended question for them. And so this is something where you can come in. I'd love to give you my list of symptoms and let you talk to us about how to ask a question.
How to ask them, yeah.
How do you ask somebody if they're having trouble, you know, reading, for example? You know, what I was usually doing, or what I usually do, is ask them how much they read before the crash or injury causing event, and how much they read now. And if they can tell me that there's been like this loss, or it'll start the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, you could even ask them, tell me about a book that you've read, you know?
Yeah. And then it'll start the conversation.
And you'll be able to tell by the way they're talking and they're sharing what's going on, and maybe there's some other questions to ask.
Yeah, I think that's the to me, if you can come up with one or two really good questions for each area of the brain, if you can talk to them, you know, frontal lobe is a lot about inhibition, and it's like that thinking, it's that knowing your limits, behavior control. It's I always think of it as like your animal instincts, right? It's a thing that doesn't make us an animal. Like, as much as I'd like to go, you know, stick my hand in that cupcake and just grab it and just shove it in my mouth, you know, it's the thing that makes me, my frontal lobe's like, it's not a good idea to do that in front of everybody today, right?
Right.
And so my question, or I just want to scream at the grocery store because you're in such a long line. If your frontal lobe keeps you from acting out like that, you know, learning how to ask people if they're having trouble, like acting out. Are they having trouble feeling like what's appropriate? I think if you can master the art of asking questions, you'll identify these a lot better.
Yeah, it's important. And the thing is, it's important to give the intake team, whether they're outsourced or not, the proper training, no matter what kind of, you know, marketing you're doing, no matter what kind of, just give them the right kind of training for each niche area. Don't just say, okay, we're doing a new practice this month, everybody. You know, let's go get all those calls.
Don't we all do that?
There's going to be a ton of calls. Get ready.
Yeah, no, it's hard. And it's remembering, you know, I also say this sounds bad, but that very annoying client that calls you all the time and asks the same question over and over, they usually are a TBI client. Like, screen them. If you've got a client that's being a real pain like that, they usually are a TBI client. Something like that is going on. So I tell people, don't write them off as annoying. They probably just have a problem. But you could really, I think that, you know, a good, I don't know if your book is still around. You know, the book that you wrote about intake?
There's 3 of them out there.
Chris, your books had babies.
They had babies, all right. They had babies, okay. Yeah.
I remember you talked about there's two things I remember so much about your book. You talked about one, being ready for that phone call. Mm-hmm. When that person calls, you should seem like you're in a tuxedo and you're dressed up and you're ready and you've been waiting all day for that phone to ring. And as soon as that phone rings, like, bam, lights are up. It's like, it's showtime.
You're on the stage.
Yeah. And I remember that. And I also remember that you talked about you craft your questions. You talked about crafting the question. And if you need to get this piece of information out of them, you got to think of all the ways that you're going to get someone to tell you something. And I think that when I send you this, it's helpful information, but it's only as helpful as you allow it to be.
Yeah.
But also make it your own. Ask the question the way you would ask it. Just because that's the way I asked it doesn't mean that that's the way you should ask it. There might be other ways to talk about, nervousness or moodiness or brain fog or lack of focus. There's lots and lots of ways.
And you have to be really careful because typically with intake, lots of phone calls, day in and day out, inbound, outbound. So at some point, intake experts end up sounding like license and registration.
That was the other thing I remember you saying.
Oh, yeah.
I always think of, what's that movie? It's like some sort of zoo movie where they're at the DMV and they're like, next. I think of it every time I see the sloth working there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know about that movie, but the thing is, it's important in every practice area, but especially with TBI cases, because if you don't sound like you really care about each question that you're asking, they're going to know.
They're going to know. Yeah. Zootopia.
Yep.
So the Zootopia was the movie I was trying to remember.
There you go.
But yeah, you're right. They're going to know if you don't care and you're not paying attention. And they're also going to know if you don't know what you're talking about, right? And so I beg of everybody, get some education on whatever topic you're asking about. If you're asking CRPS questions, know enough about CRPS that you can actually have an intelligent conversation about it. Yeah. You're asking about brain injury cases, know enough about these brain injuries that you know what you're talking about. Have enough of that knowledge stored in here so that, because if not, your clients are going to know, they're going to see through it.
Yeah, so they could have a master training class or something like that, but there's no sense in doing the marketing for these types of cases if you're not going to make sure you're set up for success with your entire firm. So what is it that got you to get into TBI cases?
Two things. Two things. I guess I rarely talk about either of them, but when I was younger, I was mostly, my mom was a single mom, but my father's father, my grandfather, spent a lot of time raising me with her, and he used to pick me up from school every day. He died after a brain injury. And so that was always something that kind of stuck with me. And I didn't really understand it when it happened. But it just, whenever anyone talked about a brain injury, it's sort of, if it's familiar to you, it kind of hurts there. The other was when I had just graduated from college and I just started law school, a doctor accidentally cut off 3/4 of my pancreas. And I was in the hospital the first time for about 8 months. I was in ICU, and then for the next 5 years, I was really mostly in the hospital versus out of the hospital. But for a good 8 years, I was really, really ill. And in that time, you really get to know medicine though, right? I really got to see my mom fight my insurance denials, and I got to see my mom fight with all these different kinds of doctors and get second opinions and third opinions and all these other things. I finally got well enough to go back to law school. But when I got back to work, right? So you go to law school, you take the bar. And when I came and I landed in PI, I naturally gravitated towards these audacious carry horrible cases that had all these medical records. Well, I was the first one to like dig in and read them. And if I didn't know it, Google it, call someone. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And so because I think I had so much like sort of medical sort of knowledge because of myself, and I wasn't really scared of the medicine, I think it left me with these larger cases and sort of a heart for them. And then, or these cases had these larger medical issues in them. And then on top of that, it was not just anything catastrophic. It was, well, that's what took my grandpa away. Let me understand it better. Let me understand the brain. And after 2 decades, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, these cases are just learning about the brain and staying on the forefront of all of that all the education that's happening and all of the different advances that were happening. But also in law, we make such a big difference. You know, I have a case right now where it's a straight hormone dysfunction case. And it was a client that I had seen a year ago. And then I saw her a year later. And it was because of the whole pandemic thing. And she did not look the same. I didn't even recognize her. And I was like, what is going on? She's gained this weight. She just didn't look the same. She had lost some hair up on top. She just looked really bad. She looked really, really bad. And because of all the brain injury conferences I constantly go to and whatever, I knew about this hormone dysfunction that happens. Sometimes it arises out of the brain injury or it happens in addition to the brain injury. And so I immediately sent her for some testing. The first testing came back normal, as it always does. Sent her for the second panel, sent her to whatever. Long story short, we settled her case many, 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 many millions of dollars more than we would have gotten for the soft tissue spine case that she had. But it was because of our ability to identify a hormone dysfunction issue that was, you know, arising out of the injury causing event. But if you don't know about this stuff and you don't read this stuff, how are you going to know about it? So, you know.
Yeah, no, that's unreal. Okay, well, wonderful, wonderful. So what else would you like to leave everybody with today? How can they get in touch with you? You want to tell them about the upcoming conference?
Yeah, I'd love to. So one, cell phone. Text messages are best. But I give everyone my cell number. I think it's just easier, but I say this, text messages are best. Text me, I'll get back to you. If I don't get back to you that day, I'll get back to you in like a day or two. My assistant will get back to you if I don't get back to you. But my cell phone number is 562-234-0394. And you can always, always, always text me. Number two, though, I say the conference. So TBI Med Legal. It is a fun conference. It is a large conference. I'm trying to get the dates. So the dates are March 9th to 12th. There you go. It's in San Diego every year. It's a few thousand, maybe last year was a lot bigger than, I hope it's not as big this year. Last year was like 4,300 attendees. I think it'll be a little smaller this year, hopefully. And it is, last year was a lot of tracks because of COVID and we had to be, but yeah, it's usually 4 tracks. When COVID is not happening, it is 4 tracks. And so at the same time, you choose between 1 of 4 classes. Every hour on the hour, there's 4 things going. So there's always like a trial skills track that's like very trial skills focused. Then there's 3 that are med legal, sort of med legal focused. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then there's a cadaver lab outside. And the cadaver lab's always fun because that's, you know, you go out, you can dissect a brain and you can do a discectomy, a laminectomy, a fusion, spine. You can go do some stuff. So that's March 9th to 12th. And in San Diego, you go to TBIMedlegalCon.com. You know, weird.
Con.com.
Yeah, so it's like Comic Con, I guess. I don't know. They're trying to be cool. TBI Medlegal Con, CON.com, COM like Mary. But go sign up. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of education. You'll learn a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris will be there. You'll be teaching us. Hopefully, Chris, which you will teach us, is how to identify.
Yes, I was just thinking the same thing.
Different times in the case, how to identify it.
Yeah.
The intake isn't just the first time you talk to a client.
Yeah, fantastic. Perfect. Perfect.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much
for having me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Lawyers Tell All, where Chris Mullins takes you on a journey with lawyers in the trenches who show you the realities of what it takes to succeed in this chaotic, crowded, ever-changing profession. Remember to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Lawyers Tell All.